Hello there, friend. Welcome to another episode of the Meadowsweet Money podcast. I'm your host, Mimi Cirbusova, a shame-free money mentor and certified financial education instructor. I started this podcast because so many podcasts were part of my own journey in learning about personal finance. And a few years ago, there were far fewer options. Most personal finance podcasts at that time were really white and really male and really loud. But what I noticed over and over is even as money podcasts became more diverse, so many of them raised my blood pressure. Even as I became confident with my money, I couldn't finish a lot of episodes. They just freaked out my nervous system. So I set out to make a personal finance podcast that was soothing to listen to. I mean, money is stressful enough, especially when you're just starting out. Speaking of which, today's episode is all about helping you decide if debt freedom is right for you and your journey. And even if you are debt-free or on your way to debt freedom, I hope you'll listen anyway. Because there might be someone in your life that needs this information too. And later in the episode, I'll be sharing a mindful money moment, as well as telling you about an amazing workshop I'm hosting that will help you finally get a handle on your regrettable and forgettable spending without needing to rely on willpower. Ready? Let's dive right in. This July, I will be celebrating 4 years since I made my final payment, becoming completely debt-free. It took me roughly 15 months to pay off $20,881 of debt. When it happened, we were all still in the midst of the pandemic, so I live streamed for my friends and my family who had been cheering me on all through my debt-free journey, and they watched as I clicked the big blue payment button for the very last time. Becoming debt-free changed a lot of things for me, both in obvious and subtle ways. I'm certainly more thoughtful about what I allow into my life. When you pay interest sometimes 2 or 3 times over the original value of an item, you begin to rethink what's worth saying yes to. I'm much more intentional now about what I buy. I find I also spend more money on the things that really matter to me. And I have a lot less fear about my financial situation. I feel more gratitude than ever before, and I appreciate all that I do have. Debt freedom has also been a huge permission slip. Knowing I didn't owe anyone money gave me the chutzpah to peace out with my day job and pursue entrepreneurship. Living debt-free doesn't mean I don't use credit. Back in episode 6, I shared that my husband and I do use credit cards just like debit cards, which we pay in full every single month. And we hope someday to have a home, so we will likely take on a mortgage at some point in the future. Debt freedom, at least in my mind, is being able to cover all of your monthly bills with the money you actually have. That could be cash, your debit card, or what's in your checking account. So that could include a mortgage, as you're hopefully able to cover your monthly payments. For the purposes of this podcast episode, debt freedom is about not having debts associated with things like outstanding credit card balances, personal loans, whether that's with a bank or a friend, medical bills, student loans, or car payments. But plenty of folks consider themselves quote-unquote debt-free, even with a mortgage. And I want to be clear here, you can decide that your goal is to simply be consumer debt-free. Maybe you just want to pay off all your credit card debt and your car loan, but you're not going to worry about trying to pay off your student loans any faster than you really have to. That's a very personal choice, and I hope you decide to do that after you really running the numbers. Debt freedom not only saves you so much money on interest, but you also experience less anxiety. Debt is a large source of many people's financial stress. It's also easier, far easier, to save money. And you might find your credit score is boosted by paying off debt because your credit utilization goes down, which is just a fancy way of saying you're not using as much credit as is available to you. We're going to talk more about credits and credit scores and credit reports and all those great things in future episodes. So, how exactly do you decide if the road to debt freedom is right for you? Well, as I always say, it's a mix of being ready, willing, able, and wanting to. And for most of us, it begins with deciding that it's worth it. And I hope that you make that decision long before there are any big consequences for not choosing to get out of debt. Maybe you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, okay, Mimi, I'd love to get out of debt, but I have so much debt, it feels impossible to pay it off. Friend, I hear you. The moment I decided to pay off my debt, nothing special had happened. Nobody was calling and demanding I pay up or else. Heck, I probably could have kept right on paying the minimums and even opened another credit card. After all, my credit score was pretty good. When I looked at my nearly maxed out credit card and a hefty balance on a new to me car, I didn't totally believe I could pay it all off either. At that moment, debt freedom wasn't really on my radar. I just knew I wanted to pay it all down faster than the interest was accruing. In all honesty, I didn't think I could pay it all off, at least not at first. When it comes to paying off your debt, you need to have a strategy. And the most important of all is to stop the bleeding. You have to start by avoiding taking on any new debts. That means getting control of your spending, if that's a contributing factor. Eliminating regrettable or forgettable spending, living within your means, lowering your expenses, and increasing your income are all great strategies to adopt in order to widen the gap between what you're bringing in and what you need to pay. The wider the gap, the more you have to throw at your debt. And you might be wondering, well, what about debt consolidation or balance transfers? On the surface, these things might sound like a good idea, but you must make sure that they make sense for your real numbers. Though they may offer a lower interest rate, it's often for a very limited time period, and perhaps there is a fee that's based on the percentage of your balance. It might make sense if you have a realistic plan to pay it off before the interest rate jumps up. Many times, though, folks get on this hamster wheel of balance transfers or debt consolidation, and they don't know how to get off. This is a big reason why I had Bruce McClary from the National Foundation of Credit Counselors on the last episode. If you haven't tuned in, I highly recommend it. Regardless of your income or how severe your situation, their networks of nonprofits will never turn you away or try to fit you into a program that isn't right for you. Whether you decide to go it alone or get support from a nonprofit certified credit counselor, paying off debt takes dedication. That's one of the reasons I started my Patreon, because it's a space where you can get the support and the encouragement that you need. I learned so much on my path to debt freedom, and there's a few things I want you to know. Number one, it is your journey, so you get to decide the pace. The goal is to make bigger payments than the interest can eat up, and that's really it. You most likely didn't build up your debt overnight, so don't expect to pay it all off overnight either. Remember that debt freedom is a marathon, not a sprint. And it's okay to go at whatever pace you need, or change up the pace as needed. Secondly, visually tracking your progress is extremely helpful. I have a whole blog post on how to do this, and I'll link that in the show notes, but truly nothing is more motivating than seeing your progress grow over time and seeing that debt melt away. Number 3, this journey, like any other, has its ups and downs. There were moments on my debt freedom journey that were exhilarating. Like when I realized I had moved up my original payoff date from October to July, or when I paid off my credit card and only had my card payment left to contend with. But there were also moments where I cried on my couch and felt frustrated. The moments I had to turn down invitations from friends in order to stay on track. That FOMO spending trigger is something else, y'all. But in the end, it was so worth it. Number 4, the only way to do it is to start. My progress in the beginning was messy, full of mistakes, and very emotionally charged. As I kept going, I learned ways to make things easier, more streamlined, and I gained confidence. I made such little progress in the start and huge strides by the end. But I couldn't have gotten to the finish line without showing up to the starting place. Ultimately, only you can decide if pursuing debt freedom is worth it. If you found this helpful, please share this episode with a friend. As much as I love your reviews, and I really, really do, the best compliment you can give is telling your friends and family about this podcast. All right, let's switch gears with some in case you missed it. I cannot wait for you to join in this month's Spending Triggers seminar. If you are finally ready to face your unhealthy spending habits once and for all, but the idea of a restrictive budget gives you the ick, this is the workshop for you. I am teaching you how to address your spending triggers without punishing yourself for them. If you have tried to budget and you've deleted the takeout apps too many times to count, and you continue to white knuckle it until payday, friend, I get it. I was once in your shoes too. It's time to stop the cycles of restriction, deprivation, followed by mindless spending and shame. Join me April 24th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern or 3:30 p.m. Pacific to learn what spending triggers are and are not. I'll also teach you how to change your responses to your spending triggers without relying on willpower alone, and you'll discover essential activities to help you reduce your regrettable and forgettable spending once and for all. This workshop is $49, but my patrons get access for free. So if you've been thinking about supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, this is the perfect time. To get all the details about the workshop, check out the link in the show notes or visit my website at meadowsweetmoney.com/events. Speaking of patrons, I want to welcome my newest patrons, Lauren, Nia, Miranda, and Brittany. Thank you so much for your support. It is because of my patrons that I am able to offer this podcast completely ad-free. If you're not ready to, or you're just not in a place yet financially to support this podcast, you can still become a patron at the free level. I have left a link in the show notes for you, and free patrons don't get all the cool benefits like our paid supporters do, but you can still remain up to date on what's happening with the podcast, and every once in a while, I share some really cool written posts with you too. The last thing before I jump into our mindful money moment is to share that we now have listeners in 38 states and 12 countries. That's just incredible. Thank you so much for listening and sharing with those that you love. It truly means the world to me. All right, let's dive into our final segment. How are you, my dear friend? Have you been clenching your jaw? Are your shoulders way up by your ears? Take notice of where you're holding your tension, and I invite you to release it slowly with a big, cleansing breath. Today's mindful money moment is all about financial self-care. My financial self-care routine has evolved with each step up the money mountain. Each week, I check my accounts to ensure I'm on the right track and nothing out of the ordinary has appeared. Once a month, I review my spending, as well as my progress on my savings and investing goals. In total, I spend about an hour of time each month reviewing my finances. Learning to prioritize my financial wellness has taught me many lessons that have translated to other areas of my life. Small, consistent actions for my physical well-being, like flossing daily, is building, quote, compound interest towards a longer and healthier life. Viewing my income as an energetic exchange means I put a higher value on my time and energy. I never want to go into debt, so to speak, on my energetic capacity and risk burning out. Deciding to reduce as much regrettable and forgettable spending as possible forced me to get super clear on what actually brings me joy and what I value. Our culture makes money so taboo to discuss. We label it with words like evil or bad or control. We tell stories about money over many generations without stopping to question if those stories are based in fact or reality for our lives today. We avoid it and we focus on it. We put it on a pedestal. We obsess about it. There's no denying that oppressive systems and structures exist, and money is often leveraged to keep groups marginalized. This is not okay. But money also is leveraged to do incredible and wonderful things all over the globe too. I want to empower you to consider the relationship you have with money. Besides your relationship with yourself, it's one of the longest you'll ever have in your lifetime. Is your relationship a healthy one? Are you proud of it? Does that relationship feel safe? It's okay if your answer is no or not yet, because I'm here to tell you someday, with a little work, patience, and willingness, your no could become a yes. It did for me. When you get right down to it, financial self-care is about loving and caring for ourselves, believing that we are worthy and deserving, that you have value simply for existing, and my dear friend, you absolutely do. No one can do this work for us, though it's okay to ask for help. So next time you are procrastinating opening a savings account, negotiating your salary, automating your finances, or setting up a bill for autopay, ask yourself, how can I show up with love and care for myself on this? And as always, I want to remind you that you're doing great, and I'm so proud of you. Thank you for listening to the Meadowsweet Money podcast, a production of Meadowsweet Money LLC. This podcast is sponsored by my supporters on Patreon. For more details or to become a patron, please visit patreon.com/meadowsweetmoney. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast player. Even better, share this episode with a friend or a colleague. And be sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss a single episode. The information and content provided in this podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. It should not be considered legal or financial advice. Please consult with an attorney or other professional to determine what may be best for your individual needs. Remember, the point of this podcast is not money. Money is the vehicle for you to live your best life because you deserve it. For more shame-free personal finance content, visit meadowsweetmoney.com. Thanks for listening.